our session so that we will be able to share this presentation with everyone. Now I want to turn it over to Gagana, who's going to share a bit more about SGP. So next slide, please.
Thank you, Carmen. Welcome, everyone. I'm Girgana Tsvetkova, and I'm Secretary at Large of SGP. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Just a few words and numbers about the society's membership. So we have members all around the world and a membership structure with exclusive benefits. You can check our website, genderprofessionals.org, and become members. Currently, we have 226 registered members and more than 2,500 monthly newsletter subscribers. Our followership on LinkedIn is impressive. We have more than 28,000 followers on LinkedIn, more than 2,000 followers on Facebook, 604 followers on Instagram, and we are back on Twitter with the handle @genderprofs again, and we have 502 followers. Next slide, please. One of the things that SGP does to foster the production and dissemination of applied gender research is to host gender cafes, which are really about the horizontal production of knowledge. We have one every few months. The cafes are a virtual conversation series connecting gender practitioners, academics, and activists to explore pressing gender issues and questions. Cafes are based on non-hierarchical sharing, questioning, and learning beyond the classroom. They present a professional development opportunity for members interested in raising the profile of gender expertise. And again, we would like to invite all of you to share your name, pronouns, geographical location, and organization in the chat. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. Again, here, a few rules how to participate in the cafe today. After the presentations, there will be some on-the-spot coaching. Please use the reaction button to raise your hand to participate. When you are done, use the same feature to lower your hand. After coaching session, we will have brief wrap-ups. Next slide, please. A little bit on the agenda. So firstly, we will set the context of the topic that we are going to discuss today. Then we will introduce the speakers and briefly present the topic that we will be discussing. Then, as I said previously, there will be on-the-spot coaching. Last but not least, we will do some wrap-up and discuss the next steps. Next slide.
All right, so let's get started. I'm going to introduce our speaker here. So if we can go to our speaker slide, it is Dina Skipper. Dina is the founder and life coach of Enough Labs, and I love that title, Enough Labs. Dina is a gender equality specialist turned certified life coach and founder of Enough Labs. She supports women and girls in coaching on the intersections of leadership and confidence, and is a seasoned trainer and facilitator, and is invited to speak regularly on radical self-acceptance, women's empowerment, and being enough. With nearly 2 decades of experience working in some of the most exciting and demanding environments around the world, Dina is able to bring practical real-world experiences to her coaching and speaking. She is also a recognized expert and leader in the field of gender equality and women's empowerment, and regularly mentors and coaches women and girls to step in into their power without compromising who they are or what they are looking to create in the world. Her goal is to help women and girls get in touch with what sets their souls on fire. I love that. And her mission to give women and girls a space to explore the truth of who they are and embrace their inherent enoughness to counter all reasons the world tells them that they are not. So at this point in time, we're going to turn it over to Dina and move on to the presentation. Thank you so much. Let's welcome Dina. Give her some thumbs up, encouragement.
Yes. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're coming in from. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Just for context, I'm going to be kind of toggling between my screen just so you can see me and then onto the slides. But I just wanted you all to see my face. For anyone who's comfortable putting their camera on, I would love to see it. But if it's helpful, you can put my view into speaker so you can see me speaking. I am so honored to be here with all of you. Truly, truly honored. I have been a huge fan of the work of the Society of Gender Professionals, and to be able to be with all of you today is just really exciting. I have to admit that March is one of my favorite months for obvious reasons. It's Women's History Month and International Women's Day, and I'm just really excited to be able to share this time and space with you. I know, as we can all appreciate, how many activities are scheduled during this month. So the fact that you have chosen to share space with all of us here today, when there are loads and loads of activities and events happening both virtually and in person, I do not take that lightly. So thank you for deciding to spend time with us in this space with SGP and all of us here. So, and it made me think about this, a couple of days as I was preparing my notes for today. I was thinking about how inspiring it is that at this very moment across the world, there are so many different activities to celebrate and acknowledge International Women's Day and Women's History Month are going on. It's within organizations, communities, grassroots organizations, projects, international institutions, universities. They're all acknowledging and celebrating Women's History Month or International Women's Day in a really dynamic way. And I think it's just really it's an exciting moment every year when it comes around International Women's Day, where we're celebrating the contributions of women. But I also think it's a moment to reflect on what still remains to be done. So I love that we get to spotlight these issues. I love that. And I think it's important that we take time out to celebrate women's contributions. Because if I'm being honest, I don't think that we celebrate ourselves enough. I don't think that we take the time to really acknowledge our contributions. So today I want to be with all of you and take you through a conversation, all through the lens of celebration. And I want to just sort of lay out how today's conversation is going to go. I'm going to start off with a bit of my story about how I've navigated a 20+ year career in international development, with the majority of the time being spent as a gender advisor. Then we're going to segue into this year's International Women's Day theme, which is all about advancing digital technology and the connection that I see it having with confidence. I'm going to talk about why I decided to actually leave international development in the formal way and pursue my mission of starting my own coaching and consulting practice, Enough Labs, that's dedicated to supporting women and girls around the world to step into their most confident, unapologetic selves by simply embracing how enough we already are. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And what I'm going to reflect on and share with you all is that the last 20 years of work in the international development space has actually set me up for the work that I'm doing now, which, to be honest, is one of the most exciting adventures I've been on. And then we're going to close the presentation with some on-the-spot coaching. Now, if you can throw a 1 in the chat, if you know what coaching is. Throw a 1 in the chat if you know what coaching is. And for anyone who doesn't, don't worry. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what coaching is. Great. I'm seeing a few 1s come through now. All right. For anyone that may not know what coaching is, I'm glad to see the 1s keep coming through. Coaching is an opportunity to engage with someone on getting clarity. It allows you as an individual to seek better insight and address some of the things that might be holding you back. So if you are finding yourself today listening to my story and resonating with it, which I hope that many of you will, it might spark some curiosity within yourself. You may have a question with something you're navigating in your own career. maybe you're looking to take the next step in deepening your experience in a technical field in international development, and you'd love to get some on-the-spot coaching from someone who does this for a living. I'm inviting you to the stage. Share space with me, and we'll probably spend roughly like 7, no longer than 10 minutes on each person. So we can't offer space to everyone, but a few bold souls, courageous souls who want to come forward and get some on-the-spot coaching. So that is what we will be doing. And don't worry about the format. I'll get to that later. How does that sound? Let me know in the chat how this is sounding, how we're going to be spending the next hour or so together. Sounds good, I hope. I'm excited. I hope all of you are. Great. Thanks for the thumbs up. I can see some of that in the chat. All right. So let's start at the beginning, shall we? I, for one, have always known that I wanted to work in the international development space. Honestly, since freshman year at American University. I knew what I wanted to pursue in terms of a career. I knew I knew that it needed to be international because I was absolutely fascinated. You know, I knew early on that being in a career that had an international focus was something that was a non-negotiable for me. But really nailing down what I wanted to do was the hard part. I was interested and fascinated in everything, from agriculture to education, to peace and conflict resolution, to water security, you name it, I wanted to know about it. And, you know, I definitely tried to pursue a lot of different pathways. A lot of, when I was in university, I wanted to learn as much as I could. And unfortunately, when you are someone who is fascinated by a lot of things, it can be really hard to nail down what you want to do exactly. But I allowed myself the space to get curious with as much as possible. And what I learned in allowing myself the space to get curious and talk to as many people in different fields and see what excited me the most, I actually found the common thread, which was gender equality and female empowerment. When you think about it, there isn't a single sector in international development that does not impact women and girls uniquely. And of course, this revelation satisfied my very indecisive Libra self. For any Libras in the audience, you may relate. It can be hard to nail down what you want to focus on. So the fact that I am indecisive to a fault, I was able to take my passion in gender equality and female empowerment and really focus on that in a broad range of sectors across multiple parts of the world. And it satisfied my very curious spirit. So knowing what I wanted to do in my career was the good news. The bad news was that it was proving to be one of the hardest things to land a job in the field that I could not stop obsessing over. I did all of the things that I thought needed to be done. In college, I applied to countless internships that would give me that technical exposure. I even landed 2 coveted opportunities, one with the World Food Program in Rome and another at the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C. I was working on these issues. I studied, I showed up with internships and organizations and volunteer opportunities. I was doing it all. I went after the master's degree with a concentration in gender and development from SOAS in London. And then when I navigated into those first initial jobs in my career, I was the one who was volunteering on proposals and projects just for that sheer chance to do gender-related work. Even if it meant interviewing gender specialists, I was on it. I said, throw me in. I took a huge risk several years into the early days of my career, and I accepted a fellowship opportunity in Djibouti because I thought it would give me the necessary prerequisite international experience where I could be taken more seriously. And I said to myself, okay, take this job and you'll get more exposure and you'll be able to have more bargaining power when you come back and want to land a more technical. I can't even tell you how many informational interviews and coffee chats that I had scheduled over those early days of my career. I wanted to talk to anyone who would be willing. I went to every networking event that any DC-based think tank organized. I was trying to do whatever I could to learn and sort of crack the code of what it would take to land that position that I, like I said, could not stop obsessing over. And it wasn't until I took the biggest risk of all, after more than, I would say, 7 years of pushing, grinding, hustling, and trying to find those secret opportunities, I took a chance and I advocated for myself. I created a proposal to be an in-house gender and social inclusion advisor for one of the larger consulting firms implementing projects on behalf of USAID, who had never even given it a single thought to have someone work on gender and social inclusion in-house. If any of you are in the implementing partner space, if you could maybe throw a 2 in the chat, if you know what an implementing partner does. I want to make sure that we're all using common language. All right, I see a couple of you mentioning that you do, which is great. And for anyone who doesn't, no worries. Implementing partners are oftentimes consulting firms and nonprofit organizations that are implementing projects on behalf of large bilateral donors or multilateral institutions. So there is a large number of implementing partners that are based in the Washington, D.C. area. I worked for several of them, and the position that I created was unheard of. I was working for a consulting firm by the name of AECOM International Development, which no longer exists. They were purchased by another consulting firm. And I really took a huge risk. I created a proposal, developed my own scope of work, made a case for why we needed to have gender and social inclusion expertise maintained in-house. I took a chance to make a case to a team of senior leaders who, quite honestly, between all of us, just did not see the value of this beforehand. For any of you that may be working in the international development space, now this is about 10 plus years ago. And a lot of times the gender portion of a project was oftentimes subcontracted to other firms. So the larger firms didn't really see, this was many years ago because the trend is changing, they didn't really see the advantage of having someone dedicated in-house. And they certainly didn't see the advantage of having a team. You would see some of the organizations who were ahead of the curve. I would say organizations like CARE and Save the Children were much more ahead of the curve in some of those larger players than some of the other firms that just didn't yet see the value. They didn't get it. So this was a major move for me in putting forward the idea. And when I took that chance and made the case, and they actually said yes, it changed the entire game for me in my career. I was the one taking the lead on advising projects and proposals on how to better and more meaningfully address gender equity and social inclusion considerations. I was making the case on a daily basis on how we could be designing programs and mapping out implementation efforts to more adequately respond to the needs and priorities of women and girls in the communities that we were serving. Because one thing was clear for me. Well, 2 things. One thing was that we weren't doing it. And 2, we weren't even taking the time up front to solicit the ideas and opinions of women and girls and other historically marginalized groups in the communities that we were working in, to understand what they needed, to understand what needed to be done, and what were some of the barriers, visible or invisible, that we needed to be cognizant of to maximize participation, outreach, and access. And so in that role as a GESI advisor with AECOM International Development, they sent me to tons of countries. Now, here's the inside scoop of wanting your dream job. You may not know what it entails until you get there. Because I would look at positions for years saying, oh, if I just got a job that would allow me to travel like 30 to 40% of the time, I would be thrilled. That would be the dream. And then I got it. I was being sent to country after country, probably every 4 to 6 weeks, I was in a different place. I was living in France at the time, and I knew every corner of the Charles de Gaulle airport like the back of my hand. I knew where to get the best coffee. I knew where to get things I needed in a pinch that I had left at home, but I was constantly on the road. It was exciting, don't get me wrong. but it was extremely challenging. I was in a new setting. Every couple of weeks, I had to get up to speed on the technical sector that they were working on really quickly, and it took a toll on me. I spoke to probably hundreds of women and girls on the trips that I took, on the gender and social inclusion analyses that I was writing and leading. I was interviewing stakeholders who were doing real and meaningful work, and they understood intimately what the priorities were and what it took to create better linkages with project implementation. And I was blown away by what I was learning. And because I advocated for myself, that's what created this opportunity. It wasn't waiting for someone to mention my name in a room. It wasn't finally being selected out of hundreds of candidates. I really took an opportunity to take a chance and advocate for myself using my own voice. And the rest is history. Now, I'm not sugarcoating it and saying it was easy. The rest is history, but it's not that this was easy to get through. It took time, it took patience, and it took such a reserve of confidence in myself to push through those reasons that I thought I can't do this, or there's no way that I'll be successful at this, or being racked by the ideas of what are people thinking of how I'm showing up in this role. I had to do a lot of work on my mindset. I had to push through all of the reasons that I thought I didn't deserve to be there and lean into the belief that I did. And the next 14 years of being in the technical field of gender equality and women's empowerment and social inclusion in some of the most fast-paced, challenging settings, it made me who I am today. I served as a team leader for over, I would say, 25 different gender and social inclusion analyses and reports, both for USAID missions and projects, probably working in over 10 different technical sectors. So back to the early days, I was satisfying that need. I served as a deputy chief of party on a USAID funded project that worked on women's economic empowerment and gender equity and social inclusion research. And most recently at Winrock International, I spearheaded an accountability framework, a system that was allowing projects and proposals to have more deep, meaningful engagement in integrating GESI considerations from a technical lens and understanding what that intersectional lens in terms of what we were designing, implementing, and evaluating really meant in terms of impact. So I have always been ridiculously passionate about these issues. That's been clear. Getting there, not always easy, but totally worth it. And I have to say that it has been my experience that there is not a single sector in international development that you can't see how these issues are impacting women and girls uniquely. Think about it. The ways that women and girls access information is different. The ways in which cultural norms influence the ways in which we participate and engage, whether it be politics, education, or the workforce, it's different. And what we as women are determining in terms of our own unique needs and priorities and the way we make decisions, whether it's just for ourselves or within our families, it's different. So here's what I want you to know about this work. It's hard, but you already know this. But I mean really hard. And at times it can be heartbreaking. And the more I leaned into this work, I think it's clear that the more I was learning about this work and what's needed, the more passionate I grew, the more I tried to find these unique ways to share that passion. So I want to share the screen and go back to some slides to really demonstrate what we're talking about, what gender inequality actually translates to. Because while I think it's important in this month to be highlighting how important it is about celebrating the achievements and the contributions of women, there's still a lot to do. 90% of countries today still have at least one legal barrier to women owning land or property or receiving an inheritance or even opening a bank account. There's only 6 countries in the world that give women equal work rights. And still at 49%, the global female labor force participation rate is 27 percentage points lower than that of men. And these are just some of the examples of how, despite the considerable progress that we're making in achieving gender parity, that inequalities faced by women are still presenting a major global challenge. And the longer that we wait, and I know I'm not saying this to anyone who doesn't already know this here in this audience, is that the longer that we wait, the worse it becomes. We're making certain strides, but where the gap is still widening or perhaps remaining stagnant is not doing us any favors. And so, given that today's theme of International Women's Day is all about the advantages of digital technology, I can't help but reflect on some of the insights that I've been able to see on the dozens of projects that I've supported. And like I said, I was the one leading many of these gender and social inclusion analyses that were conducted for projects that I made a point to always be doing in conjunction with a national GESI specialist. That's something that's always been really important to me. And in my conversations and the ways in which I was able to collaborate with a team of GESI specialists in country, it always gave me unique insight. And as I mentioned, the heartbreaking part is that a lot of projects in the international development space don't always apply the careful consideration and attention to understanding what the issues are up front. You know, we know about the macro global challenges of, gaps in workforce participation. We understand that land tenure is a massive roadblock. But when we think about the scope of our projects and the ways that we're working, oftentimes we lose sight of the very tangible, practical ways that we could be moving the needle. And what I've found inside of my work on dozens of projects is that women's perspectives are often solicited, but not always followed up on and engaged with meaningfully. We rarely take the time to engage with women's organizations that are on the ground, identifying opportunities to match them with resources and technical expertise to advance their work to be more sustainable. When I think about the success stories that I've seen over the course of my career that have been shared, they rarely highlight what contributions and successes were achieved, but we don't always talk about what it took for that woman to overcome those toxic patriarchal norms or the societal expectations that for every reason may have held her back. Projects are, unfortunately, at times still leaning on reaching a quota of participation, but not really looking at addressing the real challenges that women are facing. And then in line with today's theme of the conversation, when we're thinking about digital technology, I remember seeing still in this moment how there is that hesitation of leveraging digital technology inside of development programming to bridge the gaps in communication, access, and participation. I feel like there's still a very real missed opportunity here. I think about the power and transformative potential that social media can have. And still in the development space, there's still some hesitation about how to use it. I've seen some projects do it, but it's still more so the exception than the norm. So I was thinking when I was, putting together my notes for this talk, I was thinking about, there's so much that has been published on inside of this conversation, that digital technology runs hand in hand with gender equality and female empowerment. And really, digital technology could be a massive game changer in creating a more gender equal society. But when I look at the statistics, again, heartbreak. Worldwide, roughly 327 million fewer women have access to mobile internet. Women are on average still 26% less likely than men to have a smartphone. And there is a massive global digital gender divide in internet usage, and it has remained fairly unchanged over the last several years. So when we think about access to technology and also familiarity with technology, these are real roadblocks that we're facing. There are real challenges, but there are very real opportunities when we're talking about digital technology and what it could do in terms of being a lever for change. Digital technology offers unique opportunities when it comes to online education and access to formal and informal learning. And we're talking about improving health and well-being outcomes, massive opportunities for access to information and support, being able to be creative in expression, with ideas, opinions, just creating more pathways for dissemination and dialogue. Let's talk about overall connection. Just over the last 3 years, we've been really isolated, separated, and being able to leverage platforms like social media, we've been able to be playful and connect with peers, which can be massive when we're talking about building communities and networks for solidarity. Digital technology, as I've seen in a lot of my work in workforce development projects, can be a massive opportunity when it comes to finding employment, having web-based portals where you can apply to jobs, where you can get career advice, where you can download resources and other materials on demand. That can be such a huge shift for someone who doesn't have the flexibility with time or is navigating and juggling a lot of different competing priorities. And then I will also say the opportunities for digital technology within entrepreneurship. And I would say even over the last couple of years, inside of the COVID-19 context, entrepreneurship opportunities have exploded, especially because I think women in particular, but all people across the world, have been sort of pushed into a place where they've been, I would like to say inspired, but in some cases it's been a matter of survival, but to get creative and to find other opportunities for income generation. So the challenge is that there is a very real gender digital divide. It's clear. And I think it's important to recognize that not all women have these same levels of access. There are very real barriers to what it looks like to leverage technology, to access technology, and to participate effectively. And it affects more women in low-income countries and marginalized communities. And I think within the international development space, there's a real call to action here. I think there's a real call to action to work together and to be infrastructure. It includes taking the time to respond and train people in the use of digital technology, in training and education, and promoting gender inclusive policies and practices in the tech industry. I think we can all safely say that digital technology has the power to transform the lives of women around the world. And by working together to address these barriers to access and promote more gender inclusive policies and practices, there's a real opportunity for women to thrive in a different way. But I want to offer a secondary element to the potential that digital technology can offer, and that's confidence. I think about the experiences that I've had over the course of my career, where I've seen women and girls who have been exposed to a conversation, to a different way of doing something, to being able to see a success story shared or participate in a conversation where someone talked about how they did something innovatively and how it changed things for them. I've been in conversations and in countries where I've spoken to women in an engineering program who've talked about the opportunity that they received by getting that first internship, where they were able to leverage what they were studying in their engineering program in university, and what it did for them by being given that chance to participate, by being able to be in spaces where they could apply their knowledge, that they could be exposed to digital technology solutions, or even something in the STEM field. In what I'm talking about here are spaces that tend to be typically occupied by men, or by people in power. And when there are opportunities that are intentionally curated to widen the space and widen opportunities for women and girls to be actively engaged, it is a game changer for their confidence. And I know today we're talking about digital technology, but I want to invite us all to widen this conversation, this perspective into innovative solutions. Because the more that we keep these conversations to not be centered around women and girls, the more this space continues to widen. So when I talk about what it could mean between the connection between digital technology and confidence, I think about the very real impact of digital illiteracy, which often translates into a lack of comfort in using technology and accessing the internet. So I could tell you stories of what I've seen with other women in sort of navigating their own lack of confidence in being in this space, but I wanted to get a little bit personal with you and talk about my own experience. So 3 years ago, I created Enough Labs. And I created Enough Labs to create a community, an unapologetically feminist platform to widen the space for conversation, real authentic conversation about confidence and leadership. And I did that 3 months before COVID-19 hit the scene. And I had to pivot almost immediately from a vision that I thought I could execute to being only online. And I will be honest, I had massive technophobia. It was a list of concurrent factors that I'm like, I have never done this. There are new skills that I have to up level around. I don't understand the power of social media. I don't really know how to run a business online. To be honest, some of these online business platforms kind of freak me out. I want to be taken seriously. This work matters to me. And I was building Enough Labs while I was still working as a Jessie advisor, of course, early mornings, late nights, and on the weekends, but there was a massive learning curve. And I think what's interesting for me as I share this perspective with all of you is that there was an opportunity to really face my own fears about what I didn't know. I had to get really humble really fast. I had to be able to access resources and experts who knew what this took. And I know that that's a massive privilege. I know that that is not something that is always easily accessible, but even beyond the access to resources to be able to learn something new, I think there's also the very real presence of limiting beliefs around, can I do this? Because studies show that differences in performance when it comes to scientific and ICT related fields don't stem from innate difference in aptitude. It's from people's attitudes and belief levels, AKA confidence, and their own capabilities. And so it makes me think about the massive vision I have for Enough Labs and what it could mean if there was more attention dedicated to building confidence within women and girls to see that they could actually do this, that they didn't need to be scared or shy away because of their perhaps perceived fear of failure, of what will people think. Because I know this intimately. I had to get really comfortable with failing forward, getting up again. So I want to close this part of the presentation to really call out the fact that the relationship between digital technology and women's confidence is anything but straightforward. It's very complex. It depends on a lot of different factors. Now, I think we can all agree, and throw a 3 in the chat now if you agree with the fact that leveraging digital technology is not a cut and paste approach. It is complex. Tell me in the chat if you agree with that statement, that this is a complex, multifaceted conversation. Okay, I'm seeing some of the 3s come in. We can all safely say that just because one approach to leveraging digital technology solutions works in one part of the world does not mean that it's easily transferable in another. We have real differences in terms of technology, in terms of platform use. There's countries that governments are still monitoring what people are saying on social media. There's a real fear of being public with your opinions and perspectives. We've seen the massive potential, the transformative impact that social media has had in movements and social justice movements around the world. We've seen it in Iran, we've seen it in Egypt, we've seen it all in Mexico, in so many parts of the world where we've seen it mobilize millions of people around a particular issue. But it also has some negative and potentially harmful impacts. When we think about digital technology, and when I think about the impact that it can have on confidence, I think about women who physically can't get to the capital where there is a university, where courses are being given. But if you make online education platforms that could be accessible by a woman who's outside of the city, who can't physically make it because of time constraints, mobility concerns, that can be a game changer in her confidence. I think about social media and online networking and community platforms that provide a real opportunity for connection and network building. I've seen the power of this myself in growing my business and being a part of different communities of entrepreneurs, of different resources and experts, and just being able to build friendships with people who get what I'm going through. There's a real positive impact in building those opportunities for connection. And I think there's also a really positive and transformative way of building support and mentorship. Think of a woman who is going through some really challenging experiences in her personal life. I actually saw this on a trip to Egypt, and this massive platform of women, I know it was hundreds of thousands, who felt more comfortable going into this Facebook private group to talk about issues that they were facing in their marriage, facing challenges that they were having with their mother-in-law, asking questions that they were too embarrassed to ask friends or family, but for some reason felt more comfortable in this intimate space that was created online to ask answers and to ask questions and get answers in real time. The power of being able to think differently, creatively, and innovatively around some of these issues, I just continue to be amazed. But I'm also super cognizant of potentially negative and harmful impacts that digital technology can leverage. One that sticks out when I was working at Winrock on a project that we were working on in Bangladesh, it was a counter-trafficking project. And they were confronted with a very real, very new issue that they've never been confronted with. They were working with local police outlets on the fact that girls were being recruited for trafficking through TikTok. And it was really difficult to isolate these issues. And because there hasn't been a large scale conversation about the threats around use of social media platforms and having a detrimental impact on trafficking, this was new ground. There's also massive risks when it comes to online harassment, cyberbullying, just overall underrepresentation in certain industries that require ICT expertise. And I wanted to call out too that social media can be a really powerful tool, but it also can be really harmful. And I'm very aware of the fact that there is a tremendous amount of pressure to conform, whether it be in unrealistic beauty standards or the pressure to present a perfect image. That's something that's felt globally, and it can wreak havoc on someone's confidence and the way that they show up. So whether you're an online entrepreneur or you may be someone who's in this space looking to, in a particular project, looking to share your experience, you're unsure of what it would look like or what people may think if it doesn't sound perfect, if it doesn't come across as perfectly polished. I've heard this over and over. So really that's where Enough Labs comes into this conversation. As I mentioned, I created Enough Labs in 2020, born out of this experience of my own frustration. I felt like we were moving the needle in the international development space in projects that I was working on and conversations with my colleagues about the importance of these issues of addressing gender and social inclusion. But I have to be honest, it still felt relatively ad hoc. It showed up in a proposal by making sure that there were certain transportation stipends allowed to make sure that women were participating in trainings, or making sure that we hired as much of an equal number of female trainers to put women at ease for different skills building and income generating activities and workshops. But it just felt like it was missing the mark. And I would oftentimes ask people, what are we doing for longer term change? What are we doing to really isolate the issues that, what it takes to really overcome some of the societal pressures, the expectations, the limiting beliefs that wreak havoc on someone's ability to step confidently into themselves and into that leadership role? And no one was really listening. I'll be honest. So when I decided to launch Enough Labs, it really was sparked out of this idea and the research that I was poring over. Again, I get ridiculously obsessed with things, I have to say. And a girl's confidence peaks at age 9. There's been a lot of research that supports this process, what the trend, the reality of what's occurring. And by age 14, her confidence level drops by another staggering 30%. Now we can tie in all of the different reasons as to why this is occurring. Let's call out digital technology, and social media is not doing us any favors. There's a massive pressure to conform and look a certain way and to be perfect and please.